Hey everyone, thanks for all your questions. I'll be answering them shortly, but I just want to start off and say that I'm actually not in Australia. I'm in Alberta, and these pictures that I posted are actually from a long time ago when I did visit Australia for 2 weeks. So just want to give you guys a heads up that I'm doing school from home online in Canada. Admissions GPA at UQ was a cumulative GPA, which was calculated through all 4 years of undergrad. I believe it's the same at Griffith and Sydney, since those are the other two universities that I applied to, but I would ask Austrac more about this. So I applied to University of Sydney, Griffith University, and also UQ. I actually had to withdraw my Sydney application just because I had to be in the country in order to continue with the application process. So, like a lot of Canadian students, I did apply to Canadian schools here after my last year. But in the summer, I did run into Austrec again. And just have been gone to Australia, I knew it was a great country to live in, and their education system is also phenomenal. So I honestly just applied on a whim and was in it for the interview experience, but then I ended up getting a position at UQ, and I thought it would be better for me to stop waiting around, and so I ended up choosing UQ. In terms of Australia versus other international medical schools, if you look at the CARMS matching data, there's a lot of positive results in Australian international medical graduates. So the match rates was a big thing for me as To elaborate on the last question, UQ has two phases. Phase 1, which is years 1 and 2, and phase 2 is years 3 and 4. So the first 2 years, you'll just be doing the basic sciences, clinical practice, and public health stuff. And then starting year 3, you'll be doing your clinical rotation. So I think by the second year, half of your second year, you'll be done all of the sciences, and then they have this course in your second semester of your second year called Integrated Clinical Studies, and that's where you'll be putting everything together. So just a brief overview on kind of the UQ curriculum. Currently, 2 of my classes are pass-fail, so the ethics and my clinical practice class, but clinical science and my public health class are graded. So there's a bit of a mix of both. Honestly, it's going a lot better than I expected. UQ has really taken into account all of our different time zones, so I don't have to stay up really late at night to attend classes, so it's super organized, I would say. For the most part, we pretty much do all of the same stuff as the online students, obviously, except for like the in-person clinical training and the anatomy classes, but they really tried to take into account the online portion and make sure we aren't. Super great question. My number one advice, I would say, would be to do as much practice as you possibly can. It's great to do practice with friends, but also what I did was I did questions, and then recorded myself so that I could go back and look at them and see where I was struggling to speak or things that I was forgetting to say. A great resource would also be to look up kind of like the basics of the 4 pillars of ethics in healthcare. I think that helped me as well, but if you want more kind of specific advice, just send me a message on my Instagram and I can try to help you out with that. So as an international medical graduate from Australia, you have quite a few different pathways you can take. In terms of residency, one would be the Canadian pathway, then there's the US, and also the Australian pathway, because that's also open for all. There's also a great web page on the Austrac website that kind of has a little bit more generalized information on all 3 pathways, so I'd recommend checking that out. And they also hold medical licensing webinars, which might give you a little bit more idea and more details on the ins and outs of applying and different residency options. I think the biggest thing would be to make sure you practice. I spent a lot of time on just doing the content review, and I think that didn't help me in the long term, but learning from my mistakes, make sure you do a lot of practice. Yeah, so this UQ versus Griffith decision was kind of a hard choice for me, and took a lot of thinking, but to put things into perspective, UQ is a lot larger in terms. Another big thing that I considered was the number of international connections that UQ has with schools in North America, including their partnership with Queen's. So you could do one rotation. It's based on a lottery system, but that option is there. And they also have a partnership with the UQ Ochsner program, which is in Louisiana for US students. So you could even do a rotation over there if you wanted. So just the international connections is something that I considered too. And lastly, I think Brisbane, I've been to Brisbane, so I know what it kind of is like, and it's similar to where I live now, so that was something I considered as well. And I also have family in Brisbane, so I kind of wanted to stay in Queensland. Alright everyone, thanks for tuning in and for all of your questions. If you think of anything else, or if I haven't answered your question you really want some answers, just send me a message on my Instagram and I'll try to get back to you. But thanks for joining me today. Bye!